Today is a bad day in Canada. I'm just going to call it as it is. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have Mark Carney doing the unthinkable, rewarding a terror lord group in the Middle East. We also got Pierre Poilievre, goes on Vasi Capello's show, Power Play. It's a great interview. Vasi doing her typical bad cop thing, trying to push back. It's all quite ridiculous when you're trying to defend the Liberals' record. Let's jump into this. So starting this one off, I mentioned this in the previous video. Mark Carney caught again doing a fake photo op in Mexico with bags of wheat, which is not how we send wheat. And here he is taste testing Canadian wheat made into buns.
We'll take each corner.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah. Okay. There's like a cracker right.
I got the corner piece. No more icing.
You see, you wonder why. Looks good.
They're all having a laugh. Canadians are not laughing right now. Times are tough in Canada.
Fantastic. Looks very healthy. Good Manitoba wheat. It's come a long way, and it's going to go all across Mexico and it's going to be converted into those buns that I just ate.
Look at these buffoons, wasting money. They're not doing anything in Mexico. Go sign a deal with America. Sheinbaum set to discuss trade work visas during Carney's visit to Mexico. Ooh. So moving ahead, we've got this bombshell news coming from the Prime Minister of Canada account. Also, Carney posted this on his. Canada's recognition of the state of Palestine. Since 1947, Canada has supported a two-state solution, Palestine and Israel living side by side in peace and security. Today, Canada recognizes the state of Palestine and offers our partnership in building the promise of lasting peace in the Middle East. Peace? These guys are rewarding a terror lord group in the Middle East. You also notice how they spell recognize. That's not how we spell recognize in Canada. You see it once again here on Mark Carney's account, recognize, state of Palestine. And we had Table Salt also point this out. UK Prime Minister just announced the recognition of Palestine at the exact same time as Prime Minister of Canada, also spelling it the same way. This is coordinated copy and paste. Here we have Keir Starmer, and I'm not sure if you can hear the alarm going off over there, but it's suiting because alarm bells should be going off on this announcement here.
In the face of the growing horror in the Middle East, we are acting to keep alive the possibility of peace and a two-state solution. That means a safe and secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state. At the moment, we have neither.
This guy's a weak loser. These guys are rewarding a terror lord group. As this guy says, you're a disgrace, you're a weak leader, you just poked the Jewish people and Israel in the back, siding with Islamic terror lords. We will never forgive you. Yes, we will never forgive the Liberal Party of Canada and Mark Carney for doing this. And I should note, I'm not Jewish, I'm not religious, I got no horse in this race on either side of this conflict, but it's ridiculous. The Chips and Hummus crowd are a terror lord group. They're the ones who control that whole area. They're the ones who were voted into power, and we're gonna recognize them. Got Brian Lilly posting, it's official. Carney government says Canada's recognizing, and notice how he spells it here, the Canadian way, a Palestinian state. We are now rewarding terror lords as a country. At this point, no ground announcement, just a news release issued quietly this morning. As Canuck Clarity says, it's total alignment with our closest ally, the UK. So we really have to pay attention to what Keir Starmer is doing because Mark Carney is so wrapped in with the UK. I mean, he used to live there, Bank of England governor, etc. Something more is going on there. He's got more ties. He's already mentioned, you know, we're the most European, non-European country, all that kind of stuff. But we need to pay attention to these two guys, Keir Starmer and Mark Carney, working together. This whole announcement here, as Mark Nixon pointing out, was supposed to be after all of these conditions, that Chips and Hummus release hostages, Chips and Hummus are disarmed, and Chips and Hummus played zero role in governance. That's not happening.
For the reasons I cited earlier, Canada intends to recognize the state of Palestine at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September 2025. This intention is predicated on the Palestinian Authority's commitment to much-needed reform, including commitments by the Palestinian Authority's President Abbas to fundamentally reform its government, to hold general elections in 2026 in which Hamas can play no part, and to demilitarize the Palestinian state.
So Mark Carney once again lied. I'll be adding this to the Carney lie tracker because this liar lies through his teeth every single day. We got Corey posting this for liberal apologists and fart catchers. Here's Carney's own statement from less than 2 months ago. He outright lied. We reiterate that Chips and Hummus must immediately release all hostages taken in the terrible terror lord attack on October 7th. The Chips and Hummus must disarm. They must play no future role in governance of Palestine. So Chips and Hummus not releasing any hostages. Carney lied again. He's just given $6 million to Gaza recently. We're seeing all these pieces line up. And what do we have? We have Chips and Hummus coming out today and thanking Mark Carney for the support. Melissa posting this, wow, Chips and Hummus leader Mahmoud Mardawi sending thanks to Canada to recognize the Palestinian state. Once again, you can see how Canadians spell recognize. There you go, Mark Carney. Chips and Hummus welcomes recognition of Palestinian state will lead to establishment of state with Jerusalem as capital. Senior H official Hamoud Hadari welcomed decision petition by Britain, Canada, and Australia to recognize the state of Palestine, calling it an important political milestone that comes as a result of, and it cuts off their probably stupidity is how that sentence ends. As that article mentioned there, we have Australia also recognizing Palestine. There's something going on here, I think more so with UK, but also we got to pay attention to Australia as well. These guys are not serving our countries. They're serving themselves. They have another agenda in place. France and several other countries are expected to follow suit. I'm surprised that France didn't come out to the same date here today. We got Conservative Senator Denise Batters posting this today. The Liberal Party recognizes the state of Palestine. Yes, thank you for fixing that. Now, this is all very curious, the timing of this, as Sean Fraser came out with this new bail reform on anti-HATE laws. And if you listen carefully here, what's the maximum penalty for an HATE crime?
But less than 10 years. 14 years if the maximum term of imprisonment is the included offense is 10 years or more, but less than 14 years. And life if the maximum term of imprisonment for the included offense is 14 years or more, and up to imprisonment for life. Intimidation.
So he goes on to some other ones there. That was for HATE, up to life for an H crime. Literally your entire life. If they deem what someone says or does is an H crime, they'll put you in jail for your entire life. They want a system where they can just put us in jail for all of eternity based on what they decide. And meanwhile, they are recognizing Palestine as a state today, knowing that people are going to be angry. What are they going to do in a month or two if they're able to push that through Parliament? They're going to start rounding up Canadians and throwing Canadians in jail for being angry about this? Jumping over to this interview with Pierre Poilievre. The man's sharp as a tack. Vasi tries her tough bulldog stance, makes her look dumb. We're jumping in a bit into this interview here where he's talking about how bad things are with the economy. Mark Carney essentially pushing money out the door. Billions of dollars have gone down to America, and there's no end in sight to this right now.
Out of our country under the Liberals. And unfortunately, that exodus of investment has accelerated under Mark Carney to a point where the National Bank says that the $50 billion that is left in the last 6 months is the worst exodus in any 6-month period in Canadian history.
Do you think it's fair to pin the blame? And I understand contrasting, for example, what's happening versus what they said they would do. But do you think it's fair to pin entirely the blame, for example, for that exodus of investment on this government's actions? We have never faced a U.S. president that has leveled the kinds of economic threats that he has against our country. He has specifically targeted investment as a cause for that, saying, I want investment to come to the United States. That's part of the reason I'm doing this. Like, is it not normal that companies would then follow suit when they're faced with that threat? Is it fair, really, to put all the blame at the government's feet?
You know what I think is fair? Let's hold Mr. Carney to the standard he set for himself. He said he'd have a deal with Trump by July 21st. Still no deal. He said that he would put elbows up. He put elbows down. He said he could handle Donald Trump, and all he's done is make concession after concession on his own economic decisions. Mr. Carney said he would spend less. His deficit spending is 100% more. He said that he would bring more investment, and we've had a record exodus of investment since he became Prime Minister. And finally, Canadian business leaders through the Business Council have said that Mark Carney's regulations and red tape are actually more damaging to the economy, even more damaging than Donald Trump's policies. And that's why, despite Mr. Carney's promise that he would make us the fastest growing economy in the G7, we're now the fastest shrinking economy. And on one last point, he's in Mexico, or just coming back from Mexico. Great laboratory, right? Because we're both next door to the United States of America. So how have we both done relatively? In the most recent quarter, Mexico's economy grew by an impressive 2.4%, while regrettably ours shrunk by 1.6%. Mexican exports to the U.S. are up, while ours have collapsed by 18%. And of course, Canadian unemployment, I regret to say, is 3 times higher than Mexico. So Mexico has the same problem. We both share America as our neighbor and biggest trading partner. So what have the Mexicans done right that Mark Carney's done wrong?
Well, the Mexicans capitulated to Trump. They didn't levy any, to be fair, they didn't levy any counter tariffs. Mark Carney has, in fact, levied some, but not in a totally commensurate fashion. And then you criticize him for that, right? You said
Yeah, well, of course. Mark Carney's not living up to his own words, and this is such a great strategy because the left are just waiting to jump on Pierre and saying he's a bulldog and he's being mean and all this stuff. Pierre's using the strategy of using Carney's own words against him and proving he's not living up to his own promise, leaving Canadians, liberals who voted for him, feeling betrayed. And we're already seeing that with the cuckoo clocks in the streets who are all rounded up and were surrounding his building there. They're not going to vote for Mark Carney now. And so Pierre's going to be swaying over more voters, whether they're over to the Conservatives or the NDP. It doesn't matter. It helps the Conservatives regardless. This is smart strategy. It doesn't allow the left to attack Pierre on this because it's Carney's own words, and Carney's been lying to Canadians since the beginning, since before the Liberal leadership race. Carney is a chronic liar, and his lies are getting out of control here. When the budget comes in, we'll really see how bad he lied. They're calling it generational investing in Canada. Francois Philippe Champagne went on another CTV show. I'm not going to show it because he's just a word salad machine over there, but he's like, oh, we're making generational investment. So it's going to be a huge deficit.
It's elbows down if you do that, but you're kind of lauding the elbows down approach of the Mexican government because it got them a better result with Trump. So which is it?
Well, it's that Mark Carney said that he would put in dollar for dollar tariffs, and now he's basically backed down on everything. What you don't do in a negotiation, what we're finding is that Mr. Carney, it was a real bait and switch for him to say he knew how to negotiate, because we're seeing him in action now. What you never do is threaten something and then withdraw the threat without getting anything in return. And he's backed down on dollar for dollar tariffs, on the DST, the digital services tax, on military spending, on all sorts of other things that he promised to Canadians and threatened to President Trump. And as a result, the president smells weakness. Now the Chinese see the same weakness, and they're hitting our farmers and fish harvesters. So we have far higher tariffs from both China and the U.S. today than when Mr. Carney took office, promising that he would end the tariffs.
And that is such a telling thing there, because what we've basically learned is that Mark Carney is intentionally tanking Canada. He doesn't want to get a deal because he needs Donald Trump for that re-election. There was no way the Liberals were going to win an election unless they had some magic horseshoe that came out, and it was there. It's Donald Trump. Canadians got scared of Donald Trump and what he was saying. They saw the numbers improving. They doubled and tripled down on it. I bet they concocted a plan before the election that they would tank the economy, blame Donald Trump, and do another election if they needed to. If they didn't get a majority, they would do it again to get a majority. Pierre just said it. Things are worse now with Mark Carney negotiating than when Trudeau was in there. Worse tariffs with America, worse tariffs with China. Carney has only made things worse, and he's doing it on purpose.
What would you like him to do? Or what, I should reframe it, if you were prime minister, would you do? Because again, Mexico, you've just detailed, has a much better result. What they did was not put any counter tariffs on. They sent 10,000 troops to the border. Obviously, the problems at the border are different. Like, they are viewed as one of the many countries who, in essence, capitulated to the demands of Trump in order to better secure their economy. Even though it's not dollar for dollar, our government has not done that. Are you saying that you would have dollar for dollar tariffs? You'd have 50% counter tariffs, for example, on aluminum and steel?
To be clear, Mark Carney has capitulated. He's removed almost all of the counter tariffs. So he has
on steel and aluminum.
He has capitulated on almost all of the counter tariffs. He's reversed himself on everything. What would I do? I'd pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would make us more independent by opening our country for business. We would repeal all of the anti-energy laws and anti-resource laws, the Northwest BC coast shipping ban, the industrial carbon tax. I would make it so that capital gains tax is zero when businesses or investors reinvest their capital in Canada, opening mines, factories, pipelines, and other job-creating economic infrastructure that would make us more self-reliant and less dependent on other countries. So I've said to Mr. Carney, copy my idea. Take the Canadian Sovereignty Act, pass it into law. Let's unlock a massive building boom in this country through the power of free enterprise. And then we can go to the Americans and say, look, we actually do have options now because our economy is booming and our markets are growing. That's how you go and negotiate a solid deal.
This is a great way to negotiate as being the underdog. America 10, 12, 13 times bigger than us. We can't just do this bulldog approach that Mark Carney did, but Carney knew it wouldn't work. It would piss off Trump, and then he could keep the boogeyman around. So this really was the only option here, is to diversify, open things up, get big businesses investing in Canada, and start to show that America won't hold all the cards. If they start to see that we're going to sell our oil to another country, not at bottom barrel prices like we do to America, they're going to be like, oh, we better not rock this boat because that gravy train is too good. Americans get to drive around with cheap gas because of Canada. because our dirt cheap oil that we send them, they refine it, then they sell it to other countries. They make a bunch of money off of it. We're essentially subsidizing their country's cheap gasoline. They don't want to rock that boat. We don't have refineries to refine that oil. What if we could refine our own oil or have other partners to sell our oil to? This is a huge negotiating chip. But once again, Mark Carney doesn't care because his net zero agenda, making himself and all his cronies rich, is his agenda. We're just a piggy bank to the guy. Liberals are getting used and they don't even know it.
And I'll get you, I hope to get your take on this, right? Because with Bill C5, it allows the government on a case by case or project by project basis to override many of the energy and climate laws that you just spelled out. I know that your position is.
Can I ask?
No, I understand. Just let me finish for a moment, if I may.
Please.
I understand your position is that the better signal would be to get rid of them altogether. But I've also heard you cite this LNG terminal off the coast of Germany quite frequently, how quickly they were able to get that built. The German government employed a piece of legislation almost identical to C5 in order to accomplish that. Why, if that is a positive example for you, is that good enough there? But here, you still remain critical of the approach.
So we all agree, this is where we can put partisanship aside, that we have the most resources in the world over here, but we have to get them developed and shipped over here. What's standing in the way? Liberal laws and liberal bureaucracies. Mark Carney's solution to too many liberal laws and bureaucracies is to create more laws and bureaucracies. Why not get rid of the barrier that the liberals have put in place to begin with? Get out of the way. We've got 38 projects that are waiting federal approval today. Get out of the way, approve them. We have hundreds more, according to the premiers, that would come forward, but for fear by the investors that they will be entangled in bureaucracy and legal battles for years. So why not remove the bureaucracy and legal battles and open up our economy to all of those projects? So what we've had with Mr. Carney, by contrast, is he's keeping all of the Trudeau-era anti-development policies that 96 CEOs wrote the government last week saying they wanted removed so that they could start building. And all we've had from Mark Carney is that he has re-announced 5 projects that were more or less already approved, one of which is already under construction so that he can spike the football after someone else brought it into the end zone.
Yeah, just think about that. 96 CEOs of energy companies have signed a letter, an open letter to Mark Carney. At what point do we need a completely new government here? Like, we need a system to end current parliament, have another election, referendum. Like, we need some other system here. It's tough because the Liberals are using fear tactics to scare Canadians and manipulate them into voting for them. I mean, look at the situation we have with Mark Carney and his investments in Ukraine, the rebuilding of Ukraine, all the green ones here he's invested in. Why isn't he being thrown out of office strictly for this? The guy shouldn't have any involvement in even mentioning Ukraine because he's highly conflicted. He's conflicted on all fronts. The guy's a walking conflict of interest. He said he had 0 conflicts. What possible conflicts could I have, Rosemary? He's got 103 on his own account. I've already found another one here, which is a massive conflict of interest. Occidental Petroleum Corporation. If you want to check out that video, it's here, moosechart.com. This guy's a walking, talking conflict of interest. He cannot be prime minister of our country. If he wants to continue in his current role, he has to sell all of his stocks. He should be thrown out of power.
To unlock the free enterprise system by removing liberal barriers and building everything everywhere.
So let's go back to a time when those barriers, those so-called barriers, didn't exist. I lived through a number of years where former Prime Minister Stephen Harper governed and signaled an openness to pipelines, for example. You cited Northern Gateway. The process that led to the federal government approving Northern Gateway was ultimately deemed by a court to be inadequate. I know that it's the Trudeau government that then decided not to appeal that decision, but it's not as though in the absence of the laws that you criticize, you saw booming resource development. In fact, even with the laws that were in place over the last 10 years, oil production in Alberta and Saskatchewan rose to record levels over the last 3 years.
So actually, oil production is rising everywhere. It doubled in the United States. It has risen far faster in the U.S. than it has in Canada. Investment in Canadian oil has plummeted compared to the way it was 10 years ago. And as for, you want me to comment on the Harper era policies?
No,
because there were 3 massive projects proposed in the Harper era and ready to build. But when Trudeau came in, he killed them. He killed Northern Gateway. And let's be clear, we have to get away from making excuses for the Liberals. Their cabinet made the decision to kill
To
the
not
Northern Gateway.
appeal the decision.
No. They made a cabinet decision to kill the project. There's a record of decision by the cabinet that said we will not go ahead. It was, in fairness, it was an election promise. And by the way, Mark Carney testified in the industry committee that he opposed the Northern Gateway. Furthermore, on that subject of a pipe from Northern...
Mark Carney wouldn't want to have more competition for Brookfield's businesses, now would they? It all lines up here. Carney is the worst thing to happen to Canada. He's worse than Trudeau.
Alberta to the Pacific coast. Today, Mark Carney and the Liberals have a ban on increased oil production to put the oil in the pipe, and a ban on shipping the oil out of the pipe.
Both of which they say C5 would override if the case for it was there.
They're 6 months in, and they still haven't said they would override either of those things.
On a case-by-case basis, they have. Explicitly, I've interviewed the energy minister, and he said so.
To be clear,
he said that C5 could be used for that. I asked specifically.
Could be.
Yes, they haven't said would be, but it would.
Yes, exactly, could be. Vassie's saying, oh, well, yeah, he can totally do it. He's not going to do it. And that's the point that Pierre's making here. Carney could have a new pipeline that wasn't low carbon. He's not going to do that. He's not going to have a new pipeline, period. Not unless Danielle Smith and the Alberta separatist movement really spooks him to the point where, okay, we'll do a new pipeline, but it has to be low carbon pathways project, because that's good for him. That supports his carbon credit system, which he wants to get going here, because then he can handsomely profit off, because he's one of the initial investors in Stripe, who created the Frontier Group, who created that whole system. And really quick, if you're new around here, moosechart.com, you go here, you can watch any of these videos. This whole green section here is the carbon credit system. It's just a big green grift that Mark Carney's going to make money off of. He's an initial investor in Stripe as well as Frontier Group. It's all here.
We have to be for LNG, for example. LNG phase 2 would take emissions to a level that didn't fit in BC's climate plan, so they'll have to use it. They
won't use it. So far, they have not said they will use it. They could do a lot of things, but they haven't done them. We're 6 months into the term. If you want a pipe from Alberta to the Pacific, you need to legalize the production of the oil going in the pipe and the shipping of the oil coming out of the pipe. Mark Carney has done neither, and he has not even announced he's done either. And that is why the company that was originally going to build Northern Gateway has already said they wouldn't even consider putting a shovel in the ground for such a project under Carney's current legal regime. But you know what they are doing? I'm talking about Enbridge now. They're building 2 pipelines in the United States of America, creating workers, jobs for American workers, American steel producers, American energy workers. Why is it that yet another Canadian company is taking billions of dollars out of Carney's liberal economy and sending it south? I want to bring that money back home, and we've got a plan to do it.
And those tax dollars are not going to Canada. That would be enriching our country handsomely. That's the whole point. We have oil and gas. We need to get the tax dollars. Let these companies build their pipelines, the mines, all that kind of stuff. Approve the projects in the backlog. Let them create jobs and create tax dollars for Canada. Then we can have the social programs that the NDP want. That's how you afford those things. You don't afford them by blocking pipelines and blocking mines and blocking everything and then saying, let's pay for this stuff. Meanwhile, people are chanting in the streets and don't have jobs. They don't pay taxes, period, and then want free handouts. It's absurd.
My question particularly in around the Conservative government years was to make the point that what you talk about is a big part of it, but it doesn't fully describe the situation that resource development in this country has faced. There were, even when a government had positive signals around resource development under the previous Harper government, there were many, many obstacles in the way, including genuine opposition to the building of them from First Nations groups, from environmentalists, and they were able to take those cases to the courts and in some cases be successful. Even if they were to get rid of all of these laws, there is no guarantee that any of the rest of that goes away, and that all of a sudden, if, as you kind of frame it and phrase it for Canadians, if you were in power, got rid of everything, we would see this giant boom. I don't think there was evidence of it the last time that was the case.
Well, there is evidence of it. We had the strongest economy in the G7. We went through the great global recession, having the strongest economy, among the lowest unemployment. We're the last to go into recession, the first to come out. Compare that to the present. Well, Mark Carney has promised that we'd have the strongest and the fastest growing economy in the G7. He's given us the fastest shrinking economy in the G7, the worst G7 economy today, by contrast to the best economy that we had in the Conservative years. Part of that is because liberal anti-development laws remain in place. Part of that is because he has ballooned the bureaucracy and the national debt beyond even what Trudeau has done. And part of it is that we have extremely high taxes that punish both workers and investors. All things that I intend to reverse, and that will really create a country where people have stronger take-home pay and we are a more self-reliant nation.
Why should
We can't get him fast enough into the PM seat. Things are going downhill real quick here, especially with the Palestinian recognition today. Like, now listen to this. Vasi asking a final question. This gets cut off because they're going to put the rest of this interview up later, but listen to this nonsense.
Canadians watching right now treat you as an authority on the subject when for so many months, just on the economy more largely, you told them that if the carbon tax was gone, food prices would go down. The carbon tax has been gone since April the 1st, and food prices continue to rise.
No, Vasi. We're not doing that. I don't like it when she's trying to play bad cop, and so she's stretching to do it. That's what she's doing here. She knows full well. I've been tracking the price of green peas, pretzels, a bunch of random things in the grocery store. And for example, green peas were $1 before the world event. Then they went up to $2. Then they went up to $2.25 and $2.50. Also, I checked multiple grocery stores like No Frills and Walmart, because Walmart, American company, actually has better prices than No Frills. So for Walmart, frozen vegetables and green peas stabilized at $2.50. But in No Frills, they went up to $2.75, $3, $3.50, eventually $4. I saw it at one point $4.25 for a bag of green peas, which used to cost $1. Now, eventually that did come back down to $3. I think maybe it's $2.75 right now. I stopped shopping at No Frills because their prices got way too high. And while Walmart, they stabilized them at $2.50 and they didn't get any higher. Now, pretzels, for example, used to be $1. Then they went up to $2, $2.50. And after the carbon tax was cut, that $2.50 went back to $2, then $1.75, then $1.50. And only recently now it's starting to go back up to $1.75. So the carbon tax immediately dropped the prices on gas and groceries, because once the cost of fuel goes down, then trucking that stuff across Canada goes down. It takes some time to go put it through the system, because grocery stores will make an order, that cost of that order gets brought in, and once all the product's out, then they order again. So the product has to filter through the system. And the same thing happened with green peas. They were $2.50 for the longest time. Then they went down to $2.25 after the carbon tax was cut, and they were stabilized there for a little while. And after a couple months, now it's starting to go back up. The Liberals keep spending money. They keep the money printer going, printing money beyond belief. With that money printing, it's devaluing Canadians' dollars in our bank accounts, in our pockets. As inflation rises, it takes about a year and a half or so to filter through the system. So it's just that's why the prices are going up now, because they keep printing money. They keep spending money we don't have. Send more money off to Gaza and then recognize it as a state when we got Canadians sleeping in tents. Are these Canadian values?